I'm Kathleen Murphy, and welcome to Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm here today with my co-host, Eliot Grossman. How are you, Eliot?
Hello, Kathy Murphy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm
Great.
excited about being in the studio the next time. So this will be potentially a Zoom that we won't be doing for a while
From
in
your
terms of
lips to God's ears, Murph. I like it.
using this as our method to put our good information out there. So speaking of good, today that ties in rather nicely with what we're going to be talking about. We are going to be talking about how's your attitude? Is it hurting or helping you? Now, for context, we're going to be focusing on people that are chronically in the category of perhaps not having the best attitude. I'll use that in air quotes, and we know what that could mean. So I'm going to just read the overview to give further context to what we're going to talk a little bit about today to help those out who may in fact either be on the side of not knowing that they have a bad attitude, or perhaps they are working with someone with a bad attitude. And we're going to give suggestions in terms of if you don't have anybody to potentially tell you that you have a bad attitude, perhaps some of the suggestions may be just for you, or you can pass them along to somebody that may need them. So adjusting your attitude may in fact be exactly what you need to do. Do you think you would know if you had a bad attitude? Would people around you tell you your attitude needs to be adjusted? All good questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we talked about, our attitudes can impact us, hopefully in a good way. But when our attitudes are not in the good category, we know that they can negatively impact us quite significantly, and sometimes without us even being aware of that being the case. And with the fact that many people are working remotely right now, doesn't mean that our attitudes aren't going to be able to impact us positively or negatively. They can still come across in terms of if we are having a bad attitude. It may be a little bit more difficult to read and see that, but most people can pick up on that. And then with our virtual interactions, they don't completely allow us to be absent of having bad attitudes. And although, we may think that we're disguising our bad attitude, it's really just a thin veil that's being cast on that bad attitude. We can generally tell if somebody's not in the right frame of mind. And then there are many factors that in fact influence our attitudes. It could be the number one is probably stress, perhaps lack of sleep, maybe lack of dieting well, or a poor diet, perhaps not exercising. It could be other people or just circumstances beyond your control. Things happen, life happens, and we have to make adjustments. But sometimes these are all things that can have an impact on our attitudes. So Eliot, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then if you could give us your take on these questions.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of people have you worked with that have had a bad attitude? I'll kind of take them one at a time. So let's roll with that one first.
Sure. So I actually think it's a very low number, but maybe 10%, maybe
Okay.
15% on the high end. But I
Okay.
do believe that negative attitude in that 10%, even take it down to 5% on a sales team, a marketing team, Murph, can really, really lend itself to kind of tearing the team apart and really breaking things down between you and your coworkers, no matter who it is. And
Yes.
it kind of, your success or the success that you and your team have could be at the expense of other people or of each other. And I think a lot of that negative attitude just kind of, misery loves company, right? That old saying.
It does.
But when did misery or negativity kind of make you better or build somebody up? So I think that's, a very simple answer. How about you?
So you're more gracious than I am. My number was actually much higher. I would say that I've worked with about 25% of
Mm,
people in my career that I would place into that bad attitude category, which is unfortunate. Some of that could have to do with the sheer size of some of the companies that I worked with, or at, I should say, where there were tens of thousands of employees. So there were more people that potentially had the opportunity to have a bad attitude. Some of it had to do with the culture of the company, where the culture of having a bad attitude permeated and was allowed. And so therefore you were subjected to that. I knowingly worked at a few companies, without mentioning their names, that had reputations for having bad environments or bad cultures or
mm-hmm.
bad attitudes.
Sure.
And I specifically knew that the group that I was going into was going to somewhat shield me from that. But I would say the percentage was still too high for my liking. And eventually I realized that when I had an opportunity to work at a different company
Sure.
that didn't have quite as high a percentage of people with bad attitudes, I ran for the hills.
Yeah, well, think about what you just said, right? You used the number of 25%. I'll go with a company of 5,000 employees. You're in a huge building in Boston or wherever you may be. 5,000 employees, you use 25. I'll make it simple because I'm not a math major. At 20%, that's 1,000 people that you're saying have negative attitude. That is,
Yes.
it's amazing to me because that can really destroy a company and
It,
really destroy the brand, destroy the atmosphere, destroy bringing in better employees, all of those things. And we'll talk about that down the road, but 25% is a crazy number.
yeah, and I'd like to think that some of those companies have addressed the challenges and that
I hope
those
so.
numbers are much lower, right?
Yeah,
We can only hope so. And let's talk about some of the signs potentially of
sure.
those people that characteristically have some of these bad attitudes. What are some of the signs that you've seen and come across that would be representative of somebody that fell into that category of having a bad attitude?
Sure. So I think it really comes into two things for me, and whether you're on a Zoom call nowadays, so many people remote, as you talked about, working remotely, or you're in an office atmosphere previously. The thing that always resonated with me was somebody in a meeting just slouching down in their chair, looking at the clock, maybe looking at their phone under the table, whatever it may be. That negativity just kind of builds us. There's no need for it because what happens is the people that are positive and want to be in those meetings and want to be doing well within those teams look at that person and then it starts festering, right? And when it starts
Yes.
festering, and people, humans by nature, Murph, talk about other people. That's gossip is gossip. And when you start gossiping on these teams, it starts really breaking it down brick by brick, and it really puts things in a bad way. I also think that one telltale sign for me about negativity is you don't care, you're always late, or you're miserable, or you're bitching and moaning about God, this company sucks, or there's too much work, or and that's within not the whole team, but certainly within your little, shall we say, close knit group within a bigger group,
Sure.
and that just tears it down
It,
because now you start getting to your number of 25%, right? I mean,
quickly.
right, of course, and that's a challenge, right? If you're on a team of 25 people on a sales team, and you've got, what, 4 or 5 people that are negative and bringing a negative attitude on a daily
It's a
basis,
lot.
really,
It's
really
too
hard to
many.
push ahead, really
It,
hard.
it
And
really is.
yeah,
So
so same question back to you. I mean, what do you think of some of the signs?
So some of the signs that I've seen that you've mentioned that I'll echo are simply being unpleasant. They're not the kind of person that you choose to want to be with. They're always citing something that's wrong. They tend to be short-tempered. They never take responsibility for anything. Something's
That's a great
always
one.
somebody
Right,
else's,
right.
right. Somebody there never is it their fault. I mean, not
Yeah.
even
No,
one
no,
time.
it's always their fault. Right.
Always blaming somebody else, never
Yep.
taking ownership of the problem. That's huge. That's been a challenge that I've seen for years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you call somebody out on that, oftentimes they're surprised because a lot of times they don't realize that they're that way. And I've talked a lot about how many times I've had to take mirrors to people, basically just, a fictitious
Sure.
mirror, but to say, do you realize that you're doing this? And no one had ever really told them that. And they're often appreciative when you do that. So let me ask you this also. Do you think that these bad attitudes that people have, are they situational?
Um, yeah, listen, everybody has a bad day, right?
Sure.
You and I work together. We talked about this, I think, in probably episode 3 or 4. We had a bad day. You and I were having a bad day, whether it was personally or professionally. We'll stick to the professional side. We all have bad days. Things aren't working out right. They're not going the way you want. The numbers aren't right. You're not getting the numbers on a project that you're looking for. We go outside. We get some fresh air. We walk around the building, and you readjust. And
Yes.
it does make a difference, right? It every situation, a lot of times, as you know, crunch time, meeting deadlines, things like that, people get very stressed. And it's how you deal with that stress that's going to really impact the attitude of the team. So if I'm the
Yes.
sales leader and I'm just pounding on somebody or the team to hit numbers when I know they're doing everything they possibly can,
Right.
not gonna be a win. And
No,
I'm the one that's gonna lose.
that's
I will
right.
lose as the sales leader. I believe that. So I just think that every situation calls for different actions or different interactions with the people around you. And when you accept that responsibility, as you talked about, it really makes everybody around you maybe look, as you talked about, look in the mirror and look
Yes.
at themselves and say, hey, what can I do to pick up a little bit of this slack? What can I do to help our team get ahead? What can I do more?
Right.
Let me pose
Exactly.
that same question to you. I know you've got a million situations, so you talk about situational.
Well, I'm going to give an example of somebody that I happened to be working with. He didn't report to me, but he did work for me. And he had just the lousiest attitude. And every time I had to interact with him, it was painful, probably for both of us, quite frankly.
Sure, exactly.
And I finally said to him, and I think I surprised the heck out of him, and I said, hey, how about if I take you to lunch today? And I think he almost fell over with this offer. And at first, I think he thought, is she joking? Is she serious? And you could see his mind going. And he did say yes. He said, all right, let's go. Let's
Yep.
go to lunch.
Yep.
So we went to lunch, and I talked to him about how he may not have realized, but he always seemed frustrated with me. He never seemed like he really understood or appreciated what I was asking him to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally agreed with all of that and said he didn't understand what I was asking him to do, and it made him frustrated and made him feel like his work was undervalued and that it was just busy work. And so when I explained to him what it was that I was asking him to do and why, and he better understood the situation, I'll tell you, from that day on, this guy was my next new best friend.
Yep.
And he has been a loyal, person in my life for many years later, based on that one interaction of
So I
essentially.
think, Murph, because you treated him like an adult, and
Mhm.
just as importantly, you treated him like a professional, right?
Yes.
You talked to him and you asked him why. And and
Yes.
and I'm going to cut you off and just jump in real quick, real quick. So we talk about the situation. You said, how do you address it? I've addressed it, and like you said, go to lunch or walk around the building or whatever.
Right.
Remember, we don't know everybody's situation.
No.
Somebody comes into a company and you're like, wow, this person's going to be a superstar, come on a team. And they are lighting it up for the first 6 months, 7 months. And then you start noticing a decline
Mhm.
in being late, their attitude, the negativity, minds wandering, not getting things in on time. We never know what other people are going through. So when you actually talk to somebody like an adult and a professional, it really, and this person, I've done it a number of times, and you never know how much I'm able to turn things off, I think, on the personal side and really just try to go to work and leave that stuff out.
That's hard
And
to do.
it's really hard to do. And if it starts affecting your professional life, you just don't know.
No.
This particular person I'm talking about, had a parent that was going through cancer. The rest of their family was on the other side of the country. This person was the sole kind of caregiver here and
Right.
was taking a lot out on them over and over and over again, day after day, night after night.
Right.
So I get it. Now, do I wish he had said something previously? Sure, because then it
Right.
could have helped. But sorry, that
Right.
wasn't quick, but every situation is different.
Every situation is different. And today, for the benefit of those people who may not be sure of, in fact, are we talking about them? I'm going to share some tips with people in terms of being able to recognize whether, in fact, this may be them that we're talking about, or maybe one of their colleagues. And then we'll,
Mhm.
we'll also give some tips in terms of how to go about addressing these challenges that people might have with people they're managing that have these bad attitudes, or
Mhm.
whether if they themselves have these bad attitudes, what they can do about that. So the first one is determining whether your attitude is erring on the side of hurting you potentially, both professionally and personally. And we we need to look at whether others have started to avoid us in social opportunities that normally we would be included in. That's pretty obvious if
Mhm.
you walk up to a group of people and they immediately stop talking, and
Right.
normally that wouldn't happen or
Yeah.
have happened in the past. It
Sure.
could be that your attitude has recently changed for the worse, and they've just decided to kind of socially excommunicate you. That's one of the things to be looking out for. And another one is colleagues that have typically collaborated with you in the past are now avoiding to do work with you, and will in fact take on more work just to avoid having to work with you, just because your attitude is just so bad. And then fewer people are also having conversations with you. It used to be that maybe you're the type of person that people would always be coming up to and talking to, and now it's kind of like a desert. And now it's probably that way more so just based on
Sure.
how we're all virtually
Yep.
working. But you could notice in this environment also that maybe few people are slacking you, few people are texting you, few people are calling you, etc. So that could be another sign. And then what are potentially some of the tips that you would give to somebody to potentially recognize whether in fact they've got this bad attitude that no one's told them about?
Yeah. So, one thing, I don't know if it's a bad attitude, Murph, but not everybody has an outgoing, bubbly, smiley personality. Not everybody wants to be and feels the need to be the life of the party, whether it's personal
Sure.
or professional.
Right.
So, if you're a extrovert, being in an office setting or being on a Zoom call, is easy for you.
That's true.
Being called on, interacting, engaging in meetings is easy for you. If
Yes.
you're an introvert, it's a little more challenging. Doesn't mean you have a bad attitude,
Nope.
but you could be viewed as if you are a negative person and you aren't adding anything to the team or the conversation. But in fact, you may be brilliant and could be great at what you do. It's just not who you are. So,
Correct.
some of the tips may be slowly but surely start kind of commingling it a little bit. Get out of your comfort zone and just start mingling a little bit with some of your peers. Start getting involved with one or two people. Ask one or two of them to go to lunch or to grab a drink, or just, hey, I wouldn't mind jumping in on this project with you. I think I can add something to it. It's going to take you out of your comfort zone, just like, making a video and sending it to somebody. But I think that's probably the best tip I can provide.
That's good. I like that. So a few more tips to determine if your attitude is hurting you are noticing whether people are treating you differently, as they may be intimidated by your attitude and not in a good way. You are in fact potentially repelling people based on your bad attitude. Noticing this is critical. Perhaps you have less patience and then you have had in the past, and you're taking this lack of patience out on people, and
Hmm.
you're being rude to them and perhaps less polite than you normally are. So it makes you far less, obviously, um, likely to be someone that they want to engage with. And then when you're thinking about future work interactions with other people, you're less motivated and having trouble focusing on doing quality work than you generally are accustomed to doing high quality work.
Hmm.
What might be something else that you have come to your mind that
Yeah, well, I
resonates
think
with you?
you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Your work goes from being very good to being
Mhm.
subpar.
Yes.
Your attitude goes from positive to negative. Could mean, quite honestly, and I've seen this. I sensed it. They're ready for a change. They're looking for
Yes.
another job,
Which
and
is okay.
it's absolutely okay. Nobody's hurt. Nobody's feelings are going to be hurt.
No,
We shake their hand and we wish them the best. But
exactly.
don't bring my team down.
No,
Don't bring me down. And you start bringing down the company. That's not a good thing. And don't bring people with you.
that's
Simple as
right.
that. So I
That's
think
right.
I think you've hit a number of good points.
Well, the good news is that attitudes can, in fact, be adjusted, as we're talking about. Back to
Hmm.
having a positive one, it's a matter of sometimes people calling you out on that or
Hmm.
recognizing it yourself. And the first step is to recognize that your good attitude switch has been turned off and that you can, or that it's been put on pause potentially.
Yeah.
Step two would be to consider yourself fortunate if, in fact, somebody has mentioned to you that potentially your attitude has changed for, um, you know, the worse, and that they've called you out on it. And to consider yourself lucky if they have, in fact, because telling you and being
Absolutely.
upfront with you and candid with you and giving you that direct feedback that this attitude that you have right now is hurting you can be an enormous gift that they're giving to you. And it may not be either their job to do that. Perhaps if it's your boss, then yes. And you don't usually want to have that coming from your boss. Ideally, it would be better to come from maybe a peer, or maybe somebody who is outside of
That's
your
for
group
sure.
that
Yep.
knows you well enough,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And to not take it out on them, and to shoot the messenger for delivering this information to you, because it wasn't easy for them to do
And,
that.
and it's not easy for us to accept, Murph.
No, it's not.
But
No,
you
and
have
that
to
was
be an adult and you have to be a professional and accept it. They're not telling you because they're making it up. They're telling
no.
you for a reason.
Right, exactly. And we do have a reset button. We can, in fact, hit that reset button. So we don't have to get stuck in this bad attitude. So
Right.
if somebody can call you out, tell you that you have a bad attitude, give you some suggestions in terms of potentially how it's manifesting itself, and then perhaps even better, one step further, give you some suggestions in terms of how to get out of acting that way even better. And then, getting yourself back into alignment with where you need to be. It doesn't have to be this quagmire that you get stuck in, having this
Yep.
bad attitude.
Hmm.
So I think the most important thing is not to take it out on the person that is the deliverer of the bad news,
Sure.
and that our attitudes are, they're always in a state of flux, especially right now, given the circumstances that all of us are contending with, being in a global pandemic. None of us have been here before. We don't know
Right.
how to act. And in fact, it may be impacting our attitudes in a bad way. I don't necessarily think that it's probably erring on the good way. So being mindful of that. And I just want to say that positive attitudes, I don't know about you, but I've seen that positive attitudes have generally been rewarded. It's not something typically that people get into trouble for having a good attitude. And I've seen lots of people benefit from having a good attitude and being rewarded professionally and personally as well. So, any other
Yeah.
thoughts,
Yeah.
last
Just a
minute
couple
thoughts,
things.
or
Yeah,
wrapping up
absolutely. A
here?
couple things. I think the most important one is this. If you know and someone brings it to your attention and you know things are going on, moving forward, just say yes. Is there an opportunity to get involved with a project? Is there an opportunity to take the lead on a project?
Yes.
Saying yes can help get you back to a, as you said, a good state of mind, right? Turn that frown upside down. It's, I know, a dumb, stupid little thing, but it's true.
It
A lot
is.
easier to smile than it is to be miserable. And when you just say yes and get back involved, get your brain going in the right direction, it becomes a win for everybody on the team and the company.
That's true. And I'll leave you and everybody else with this thought. In fact, I've heard that when you smile, you can trick yourself into thinking that you're happier. So even if you're in a bad mood, just smile,
Yeah.
and the endorphins will be released to have your mind think that things are better, even if they haven't improved yet.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Yeah, I would agree with it.
easy
Sure.
enough, right? So just put
Yeah,
that smile on.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So Eliot, this has been another fantastic show. We are looking forward to sharing many more other insightful topics with you going forward. So we want to thank everybody today for listening in. And Eliot, here's a virtual high five or fist bump. And thank you for co-hosting with me today. And I'll look forward to seeing everybody the next time. So thanks for joining us today on Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk.
Thanks, Mark.
See you later. Bye now.